Hello, friends. Welcome to APS Stamp Chat. Very happy to have you. I'll let our friends join in, settle in. It's so nice to have everyone joining us tonight. Watching the number fill up a little bit more before we commence tonight's Stamp Chat. All right, that number is starting to slow down a little bit, so that's my cue to get started. Well, hello and welcome to APS Stamp Chat. Shalom. My name is Heidi. Thanks for joining us tonight. Our Stamp Chat guest is Mr. Gregg Philipson. I was introduced to Mr. Philipson on a conference call with the Society of Israel Philatelists. I couldn't help myself and asked the group if anyone wanted to present a Stamp Chat, and if so, then I'd love to hear from them. It wasn't an hour later that I received an enthusiastic email from Gregg expressing a desire to present, and I knew it was a match made in philatelic heaven. Gregg has many collections that serve to preserve and promote Jewish heritage. When asked about why he collects, Mr. Philipson responded, "Philately is an integral part of my collecting. It provides a historical link with people and events from the past. Stamp collecting not only historically enhances my collection, but adds beauty from an artistic perspective as well." Gregg and his wife Michelle have donated a vast portion of their collection to the Gregg and Michelle Philipson Collection and Archive. This collection includes hundreds of images that support the Texas Holocaust and Genocide Commission's mission to educate all Texans, from students to the general public. The Gregg and Michelle Philipson Collection and Archive is regularly exhibited at major museums, universities, colleges, schools, as well as U.S. military installations. Today's Stamp Chat is sponsored by the APS Membership Department. When you become a member of the American Philatelic Society, you join 134 years of fellowship in the hobby. Member benefits include a subscription to the American Philatelists, access to the American Philatelic Research Library, exclusive member-only content, and member rates for expertising services, as well as the ability to both buy and sell on stampstore.org. In addition to traditional memberships, the APS offers international and digital-only memberships. So visit stamps.org/join now. Now, before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items to take care of. Today's session is a webinar, and as such, all audio and video of attendees will be muted and turned off respectively throughout the presentation. But don't fret, please feel free to use the chat box to engage with each other and the Q&A box to ask questions from Mr. Philipson. This session is being recorded and will be available on the APS YouTube channel. Today's presentation is pre-recorded. However, Mr. Philipson is with us live, and we will read to him as many of the questions we receive in the Q&A box as time allows. And with that, we present The Magic of Stamp Collecting, Jewish Magicians of the 20th Century.
Abracadabra, everybody. This is Gregg Philipson that will bring to you today the magic of Judaism. And I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about what abracadabra actually means. We've all heard that many times, seen it in shows, and it translates to I create what I speak. But it's really from an Aramaic phrase, abracadabra, meaning I will create as I speak. And the source is literally three Hebrew words, Ab meaning Father, Ben meaning Son, and Ruach HaKadosh meaning the Holy Spirit. And it's from the Chaldeans, and I don't know if you've heard of them, but the Chaldeans are an Aramaic-speaking Eastern Rite Catholic group that were indigenous to the country of what is today Iraq. They have a history, and the word abracadabra goes back 5,500 years during the Mesopotamia era. So this is how old magic is and how long Judaism has actually played a part in it. And I'd like to begin with probably the most prominent Jewish magician, which is Harry Houdini. And many of you know that his real name before his stage name was Eric Weiss. And these are the years that he lived from 1874 and perished a little bit young in 1926. He was American, but he was of Hungarian descent and quite an illusionist. And he was honored in 2002 with a US 37-cent postage stamp that's quite lovely. And I really love the US Postal Service's philatelic magazine, how they hung the stamp upside down with the chains on it, like it's a real famous Houdini trick. One of the other interesting things about Houdini that many of us probably don't know is that in that stamp, there's apparently some way to see something of him in chains. And I have this stamp decoder that I've actually given away, unfortunately, so I wasn't able to check it specifically. But the US Postal Service came out with stamp decoders that you could buy, and it made like secret images appear from these stamps. And I believe that Harry Houdini was one of those that you could make some fun with as a collector, especially for kids. Maybe a way to bring kids into postal collecting. The ceremony program from the post office here, you can see the first day of issue in July of 2002. I thought it was also remarkable how they did the text of Harry Houdini hanging upside down, much like they did the cover of the magazine that we just saw. Some fun stuff. And I might also mention that the background you see in my PowerPoint are the actual eyes of Harry Houdini from one of the most famous images that's out in the market today. Now, something that you probably haven't seen too much, you can see the very iconic image of Houdini in chains on the left, but there's some interesting other philatelic things here. In 1951, there was from the International Brotherhood of Magicians, issued a label celebrating the passing of Harry Houdini in 1926. And also there was a movie starring Tony Curtis, and that came out in 1953. So you can see a little label that Mozambique came out with. And the country of Grenada came out with a Harry Houdini, very interesting image of him. I've really not seen that anywhere else before. Now, one of the other labels that came out, I call it a label, Angola put it out, I'm not sure if it's real postage or not, but these are famous, it says Legends of the 20th Century. And you can see Harry Houdini up in the top left there. They've used that iconic image that you see in the far left of the screen. But there's some other interesting people on here, Steven Spielberg, Woody Allen, Barbara Streisand, of course, Albert Einstein, and Kirk Douglas. And it's fascinating that he's considered, at least in this particular environment, as one of the world famous Jewish legends of the 20th century. Now, here's something that many people may not really know an awful lot about. Harry Houdini was also a pioneer in powered aviation, in powered flight. And in 2010, the country of Australia issued a series of 3 stamps, one of which you see here is Harry Houdini's 18 March of 1910 powered flight in a biplane. And you can see also on the back that on that, what could be an early tail fin, you can see the name Houdini. So it appears twice on this actual stamp. In 1909, I believe it was, he actually purchased a biplane and hired a full-time mechanic to actually teach him and get this plane functional, and went to Australia. And I believe he had, you could double check these, the facts on some of this, but I believe he had about 3 flights. And after the third one, he actually never ever flew again. There was no accident. They were all successful flights, the ones he took. But the country of Australia actually issued a $1 coin. And what you see here in this little first day of issue envelope below is the front and back of that coin inserted into a first day envelope, if you will. This is the official first day cover issued in Victoria. And on the back side, there's, there's also a card on the left that gives quite an interesting information panel about all 3 of the aviators that were involved in flight in Australia during that time. They set some interesting records. And I don't have this in my possession yet, but this is one of 2 that I've seen of actually the stamp postally used. And this was sent from a small area in Victoria, Australia, and it's in the mail to me coming from Portugal, and it's beautiful. It's got a great cachet of the actual stamp on there. It's philatelic mail, it's airmail, and the seller of this, I bought it on the website called Del Camp that many of you know. He said that he's just scrambled the letter so that nobody can see the thing. When I get it, it'll have the actual proper address and what have you. So I thought it was fun to own it where we could actually see the stamp actually used. There's a number of different places that have issued some interesting things. In 1976, there's a 50th anniversary stamp from Jersey, and it's really, I thought it's quite clever. Oh, and also, if you didn't know, Houdini passed away on Halloween, on October 31st of 1926. And these are some of the handcuffs in that cancel, the Houdini cancel that this variety club, the Houdini Variety Club came out with. Now, I will be frank with you here. I do not own this photograph. I found this. It's selling for $1,700. However, it's very interesting. It is from the 1930s. And there's a nice letter, and it just shows how many different Houdini clubs there are, how many there were, and you can see at the bottom the insignia of the International Brotherhood of Magicians. It's not IBM as most of us know it today. IBM is a magician organization. So these are just a couple of the letters, very nice. It's dated 1931. And another thing about these clubs, these are from the Jewish hospitals, from a Jewish hospital in Philadelphia. And it's very interesting. They both mention the Houdini Club. And it's so important, as we'll see, that magicians, there's so many made their livings from it, but there's so many amateur magicians that just take this to make people happy, kids and adults in hospitals, and bringing some fun and some hilarity, if you will, to the world. And this is just an example of these Houdini clubs in action. Now, David Copperfield, who is one of the, I think Forbes said the most commercially successful magician in history. I had the opportunity over this past weekend to actually interact on a 30-minute live presentation he did. And he's won 21 Emmy Awards, 38 Emmy nominations. And he is, again, he was born David Seth Kotkin, and he mentioned recently that he likes to see his son play hockey because it's got Kotkin on the back of his jersey. But as the most successful magician in history, this is this label sheet or the stamp sheet on the far right. I really like that because it's got both Copperfield and Houdini, 2 of the greatest magicians that have ever lived, let alone Jewish magicians, on the same stamp sheet. It's kind of fun, and it's a real doozy. Now, this is a picture of David Copperfield with my cousin, Sarah Krasson, who's an attorney by trade, but she's an amateur magician and quite proficient at both of her trades. And this is her with David Copperfield. Sarah was on the meeting with David over the weekend, and she's the author of a book called Own Your Magic. As an attorney, she's very interested in how magicians can actually, you'll learn during this presentation, how many magicians actually create the magic that they're doing. And they want to have trademarks and patents and so on. It's a very lucrative and a big business. And for people that are interested in protecting themselves, she wrote the book with all the appropriate forms and what have it in there, so people can do a step-by-step. That's her bear, Bamberg. And Bamberg performs with her all the time. And one of the things you'll see later, we'll find out about why the bear is named Bamberg. Now, Sarah comes from a family of magicians, and that's her mom, my cousins David and Minna Krasin in New York. And David, of course, was a magician to stars. That's Michelle and I at our wedding in New York City at the synagogue, and David is performing magic there. Now, what's even nicer, in Hebrew, there's a saying called Ledor Vador. It means from generation to generation. And that is their grandson, Minna and David's grandson, Max, and he's also a budding magician, as you can see, outside his apartment in New York. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's very, very important because all of the people you see, all the Krasins, my family, this is Dr. Hy Penn from Houston, a very dear friend of mine. And he goes around, as I do, not with magic, but he does magic at retirement homes and places like that. And he also is a dear friend of David Copperfield, as you can see on the right. And it's very important. So many people are out there doing free things and providing magic for a lot of people to bring some joy and happiness into the world. And this little picture here is our Israel and Malka Philipson, and we call this Beauty and the Beast. And Israel, as you see it by his sash on there, he's obviously having some difficulty, and we call him in our family a real Houdini wannabe. Now, some of you may know this guy. Although Magic Magazine is no longer being published, this is the great Valentine, Carl Valentine, who probably was the only magician who never really completed a trick. His shtick was that he would perform and everything was a joke. Nothing ever seemed to work. But he was quite famous, and this is him performing, the world's greatest magician who never made a trick work. But you may know him from Gruber in Mikhail's Navy. That was really his secondary claim to fame. So we have this card, and it's just kind of some fun stuff. But Carl Valentine is the great Valentine in Gruber in Mikhail's Navy. Now, this is a very interesting guy. This is a Jewish guy named Theo Bamberg. And I want to just check my notes here because there's some really important stuff about the Bambergs. And that's where the name of my cousin Sarah's bear comes from, Bamberg. That's their name. There were 6 generations of Dutch magicians, all from the Bamberg family. They were an upper middle class, unorthodox Jewish family. The oldest sons were magicians and carried on the tradition to the next generation. Theo Bamberg's 2 younger brothers were also magicians. 3 Bambergs were court magicians entertaining the royal family. The chain was unbroken for 165 years from the 18th to the 20th centuries. The Bambergs were not only expert magicians, but also trained actors. And we have, there's some beautiful things here, programs from the 20s, the 40s, tokens that were very common in the industry. Max Malini was another quite famous Jewish magician, and He lived from 1873 to 1942. His name was Max Katz-Breet, and he performed for presidents and at Buckingham Palace. Interesting, he was from Poland, but he died in Honolulu. Very interesting guy, and as you can see, the things from our collection, quite an entertainer and very famous in his day. Herman the Great was another famous Jewish magician from France. He lived from 1844 to 1896. He died in New York. He was only 52 years old, but quite famous, and these were very big productions, not just shows that somebody would stand up and do some magic. These were huge stage shows. And as you see by some of these graphics here, we're going to talk more about the some of the lithographs and posters that were created. Although his wife, Adelaide, was not Jewish, she was very accepted by his family. She was born in England in 1853 and died in 1932 in New York. But she was also a wonderful, wonderful magician. And you can see here from this postcard, Adelaide Herman's Sleeping Beauty trick. She was known as the Queen of Magic, a beautiful woman, both from her performance capabilities and the way she was perceived in public. Now, Sam Berland is another very important person in Jewish magic. So some people, although they were performers, people like Berland were magic dealers and inventors of magic. And we talked about Sarah's book, and many of these people invented their own tricks or paid fees to utilize the tricks that other people had invented or improve on those tricks and made them even more exciting. And this is just one of the publications that Berland put out about amazing tricks with cups. And amateur, they used to have magic shops around. People bought this by the thousands. Another Jewish magician, this is a beautiful issue of the Sphinx magazine that we have in the collection from 1926. This is also no longer being published. But Joe Berg was a magician, like Berland, an author, and a magic dealer. And I wrote a prolific inventor and improver of tricks and a master maker of trick decks. Obviously, cards, tricks were very, very important. Now, the great Raymond, Maurice Raymond, wished everybody a Happy New Year in English and Yiddish on one of his publications. There's not a tremendous information about him, but it says to read, see the key. And I have yet to find anybody that knows what that key is and what that really means, but we know that that's a Yiddish Happy New Year message. Now, here's a couple of interesting things. The mysterious Snyder on the right. Take a look at both images. I have a couple of these postcards. They're pretty hard to find. It's the Israelite Artistic Club, Miss Sonia and Sims. And if you look very closely, those are either twins or somebody in drag or something. But again, there's been a write-up about this, but nobody can quite figure out what this was really all about. Now on the left, we've another guy. This was a German. You can see the Jewish icons, even in the crescent moon up there has a Mogen David, a Star of David. And this is the Ramesh, the Turkish illusionist or magician, and a postcard with his image on it and his performance. But we know little about him as well. Now, of course, it's difficult to talk about almost anything Jewish without finding something or someone, as you'll see, anti-Semitic. So I said the magic of anti-Semitism. So here's a letter. It says, Goldstone. This is a quote from inside the letter if you can't read it. Goldstone is Jewish, and so are the above mentioned. I guess that's enough said about that. So here's a letter from a company, a New York Pharmaceutical Association. And the guy is, this is the office in San Francisco, and it's from 1922. And this guy's kind of upset. I guess he might have been running for some office in the magic organization there. and just very much belittling anybody Jewish that's in this organization. It's kind of a tragic thing, but we see it everywhere. You see the seal up on the top, the embossed seal on the top there as well. Now, let's talk about moving into the Holocaust. This guy, Herbert Levin, known as Novelli. So you saw the anti-Semitism from 22, but we know that the Holocaust era is from 1933 to 1945, the year Hitler came to power in Germany. And of course, the demise of the Nazis and the end of World War II in 1945. So Herbert Levin was a magician, and he got caught up in the Holocaust like most Jewish people in Europe of the day. And he survived by doing tricks. He was recognized by SS guards in the concentration camp in Auschwitz, and he actually survived by doing magic. And that's a children's book. I have that both in English and Spanish. It's all about his tale and his life. There's some great stuff, original photos in the back of that book. And then a guy that he met, William Rauscher, wrote this book about death camp magicians, and also this pamphlet that we have in our collection. It's pretty hard to find about Novelli and his life and so on. And this is just, I thought you might like to see what it looks like, the Spanish version. That one's a little tough to locate. And unfortunately, Novelli survived the Holocaust, but Louis Lamb, who was a magician, a magic dealer, and an author, he was murdered in the Sobibor concentration camp, the death camp in Poland, in 1943. And these are two of the pamphlets that we have, originals, produced by him, obviously before the war started. And again, a tragic situation for Jewish magicians caught up, and it really didn't matter what you did in those days. If you were Jewish, you were pretty much destined to perish. Alois Kastner, this is one of my favorite parts of my collection. This is an original photo postcard signed by him and dated 1925. And as we'll see about Kastner, during he left Germany probably around 1940, I suspect, maybe 41. He left and never went back until well after the war. But this is one of the most beautiful pieces of philatelic material I have in our magician collection. This is from before the war. It's mailed in Germany. It's 1934, so it's a Holocaust era, but before the war started in September of 1939. And this is a printed poster on the back. This is not applied. This is actually printed. And if you can see at the very bottom, it says Adolf Friedlander, Hamburg. And that's a famous Jewish lithographer that we'll talk about later in our collection from Hamburg, Germany. That's actually printed on the back of this advertising envelope. And that's magician in German. And so it's a beautiful piece of philatelic material mailed in Berlin, advertising a major show that he was about to do. This is a little bit, this is a modern reproduction of a Kastner postcard. And you see the elephant there, that's his elephant Toto. And he was famous for making Toto disappear. And unfortunately, Toto disappeared during the war, probably in a bombing raid is what they suspect. There was so much damage all through Germany and throughout Europe in that time. But that's a famous poster, and you'll see that little spade in the bottom, that logo. That's also an Adolf Friedlander poster. And it's reproduced and sent. Unfortunately, the cancel is not clear, but it's a reproduction of a 1931 poster mailed in England. This is another card, and this one is from 1939, March, and this is about the time my wife's father was escaping from Poland He's still operating in Europe, and as you can see, this is Bern. This was in let me see. This was actually mailed in Lisbon, Portugal, and again, him with the elephant, a cachet, a beautiful cachet on the left. It's airmail envelope. And on the far right is that's just a unusual label. It's the only one I've ever seen, advertising label of him in the 1920s image of advertising one of his shows. These are some other interesting things. This is 1931 from Prague. It says Kastner's Indian Collaborator. So Toto was a Indian elephant, and that's what's inside this theater program that I have in the collection, and you see Toto holding up Kastner's image there. This is a 1919, this letter, which I've not translated, but this is the letter with its appropriate cover from 1919. It's a beautiful cachet, and that's the magic circle is what that means in German. And the Magic Circle is a big, famous magician organization, much like the International Brotherhood of Magicians, IBM, if you will. So that's this program was inside with that letter in that envelope. That was the actual contents. Beautiful piece of magic philatelic material there. Now, he also, this is an actual program we have from the Apollo. And you can see they gave out a variety of different tokens in different cities. Sometimes they had it by city. My favorite one, though, is the one on the left where they actually, you can see it looks, it's a good luck token, and it has Kastner's elephant on the reverse side. Now, this is this is 1936. These are original photos I purchased from someone in Germany, and these came from well, we'll talk about where the photos originated, but we know this one is 1936 because that's the Kastner's, that's Toto with a cover on him, and that is the 1936 Nazi Berlin Olympic bell, and you can see the Olympic symbols off on the bottom there on the cart that it's on. So that's dated 1936, and in a parade where they're advertising the Olympics, taking the bell around Germany, there's Kastner performing, and you can see the marquees at a couple of different theaters. So these are some other ones. You see Kastner on the left one, the elephant with the rider, the trainer, and I want to make special mention of the yellow arrows there. You see the Kastner hat, but I'm really pointing out the individual. That's the same guy on the top and the bottom picture. He ended up being part of the Kastner show. It was a German show, German folks. He ended up being a Nazi soldier, and that's whose album all these photographs came from. This guy, and I don't know whether he survived the war or not, but he was Kastner's elephant handler. Now, what's even worse as we get on here, Kastner fled, and this guy, Kalinag, he's a Nazi named Helmut Schreiber, a famous German magician also. Huge stage shows, much like what you see with Copperfield today. Kastner had that kind of show, and so did Kalinag. Kalinag, you can see this one particular card here, German card mailed after the war, postmarked from Hamburg, Germany. This was how they advertised their shows. This is probably from the 1950s. 53 actually is the Hamburg postmark. This guy was an actual Nazi. He made these cars disappear after the war. And you can see his wife, Gloria, on the right-hand side, some other postcards. But what was really bad was he stole Kastner's disappearing elephant trick and used the technology to do the disappearing car and other things. And sadly, this is a reprint from a Magic magazine that's also no longer being produced. But that is him with Hermann Goering, the head of the German Luftwaffe, one of the top Nazis that committed suicide just prior to the Nuremberg trials. And it's really sad. And he tried, this is an actual photograph of him doing magic tricks directly for Adolf Hitler. So it shows you not only did he steal this Jewish guy's magic, but he actually was performing for some of the top Nazis. And this guy Rauscher that wrote the books on Novelli, the Jewish, the magician of Auschwitz, he actually wrote this book. If anybody's interested, it's worth reading, The Magician of the Third Reich. And this is really heartbreaking stuff when you see what happened. This is actually from the September 1964 Genie magazine on page 29. I'm often asked if I performed for Nazi big shots. This is quote by Helmut Schreiber. Naturally, I did. I performed for Hitler on German Arts Day, and he was impressed with my non-political magic. Once in a while, he would call for me to come in his house in Munich to perform for him. Just like it's perfectly acceptable. And I put a note in there, what would political magic be? I have no idea what he meant by that, but it's really scary stuff when you think about it. Kastner reappeared in Berlin, and I think he did one final show. I think it was in 1956. That may be a card from his final show. Again, an older advertising card reused. But he used it to mail just as a friendly postcard from his family in March of 1958. Really nothing to do with the show. But he kind of never really did much after the war. And Schreiber tried to perform in America in the 1950s, I believe. I'm not 100% sure if it was 50s or 60s. But once they found out his Nazi background, they made him leave. So he never really performed here in any main degree. Another thing I found here, just talking about Kastner, the elephant, Schreiber kind of stealing that show. My cousin, when I was talking, when I was listening on the magic thing over the weekend with Copperfield and so on, she talked about these Camel cigarette ads, and I thought this was really interesting. I had never heard of this before, and I went and found this. I don't own this. I found it on the web. This is one of a whole series of Camel cigarette ads where they were actually telling you how magic was performed, literally giving away how these tricks were done. And I thought it was interesting because here it is, Kastner's trick on the disappearing elephant. It turned out that when they were sued, they actually won the lawsuit, that Camels was not held liable because when they do these patents and so on, they actually have to tell how the trick is done. If the patent expires, that it's already been released, that there is no liability. And I just thought it was interesting because there's some background on the disappearing elephant trick. Erich Jan Hanussen, fascinating as well, a Jewish clairvoyant, and this is a famous book, Hitler's Jewish Clairvoyant, was actually doing things for Adolf Hitler. And when he took over Germany, some of the other Nazis found out that Hitler was really listening to this guy, and who knows what he was telling them, but he ended up being murdered, and most likely by some of the brown shirts or SS guys. And it's fascinating reading, and if you're interested in these kinds of things, something about magic and clairvoyance and so on, might take a look at this as well. There's also Hitler's Jewish, the Nazi Seance. This is another book by Magida, and again, it's a strange story of the Jewish psychic in Hitler's circle. Fascinating stuff that most people really have no idea took place during that time frame. So I'd like to spend a few minutes on Adolf Friedlander, a Jewish lithographer, along with his sons. That's an early picture of him in Hamburg, Germany. And these are some beautiful things from my collection that are showing different circus and magic type performances that people would use to advertise their where and when they would be performing. So you can see it's greeting from Bruce's greeting in German, greeting from the circus Loeb, and different things. But these are all his artwork. And you can see on the bottom one, the AF on the bottom left-hand corner. The other one has the spade. The upper one has the spade on the bottom left, which was his logo. Some beautiful things. Postmark in 1900, 1902, very early 20th century postcards. This one, although it was not mailed, this is a famous little person who was Fräulein Angelica. And this is a very rare card of what she would look like during her performances, stage performances throughout Europe at the time, very early 1900s. This is a beautiful postcard. This was mailed, I'm trying to see the date on this one. I'm not sure if I can get the cancel exactly, maybe 1901. 1910, there it is on the other one. That may be a receiver on the bottom left. It's a beautiful piece of Friedlander artwork for this particular circus, the Bush Circus, very famous circus. Gorgeous philatelic material here from the very early 1900s. And this was one that you can see Friedlander's little spade logo on the bottom right of this card. This is a 1920s advertising poster of Katzner's show, Zubermeister, the magician, illusionist, director Katzner. Beautiful artwork. And for many of you that know a little bit about magic, devilish kind of things were always very popular in advertising for these kinds of performances. I thought if you were interested in books and you like to read about these, The Magician of Lublin is it's about a Jewish magician in Lublin. It actually was turned into a movie. And The Magician, a 1973 prize book. On the left-hand side is another one. It's an adaptation from very early Yiddish, a very early European Jewish language, if you will. And as you can see, Isaac Singer was the winner of a Nobel Prize for Literature with this in 1978. Very popular, well-received books here. And then for kids, if kids are interested, you have children, grandchildren that you might want. A mitzvah is a good deed in Yiddish. And the mitzvah magician is just a little something fun for kids to learn about using magic and learning nice things to do for one another and for other people, doing mitzvahs, doing good deeds for people. Just a fun book. And that's really wraps up. This is a fun label at the bottom there. If anybody's interested, I'm available after this presentation for a Q&A. But if you have private things, you can reach me at greggphilipson@gmail.com. And we have a host of subjects and on many different topics if you're interested. So with all of this, I thank you for your very kind attention. I hope everybody had fun. And mostly I hope that some people learned a little bit about something you didn't know about. Thanks a lot, and everybody have a great rest of your day.
Hi, friends. Just one moment.
Abracadabra, everybody.
Oopsie.
This is Gregg Philipson.
Hello? Are we there?
I'm here.
Okay, great. I'm womaning the two laptops here. So just one moment. I'm going to stop sharing screen. Stop sharing screen. Okay, friends, thank you for your patience while I woman this setup here. Oh, well, thank you so much. That was a magical presentation. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, we'll go ahead and take those now. Let's see.
Heidi, somebody had asked about the title of the book. It's The Magician of Auschwitz. And I think, let me see if I have that. I might even have it handy here.
Okay.
If you can see that,
Oh, good. Thank you.
somebody had that.
The Magician of Auschwitz, friends. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, you can go ahead.
You've got a bit of a reverb there, Heidi.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure this out, guys. I can't understand why. Let's see if I go back to the mic. Thanks. Let's get you a question, Greg.
Somebody just asked if there were stamps from foreign countries. And I think that they're of Jewish magicians, and I guess the answer is yes, it definitely Houdini. We know that he's on the Australia Centenary of Powered Flight stamp, and I'm sure there were some others that we showed there. I don't have a list of all of them, but I'm sure there are others in addition to the ones that we showed here.
Okay, well, and then well, we have a friend, I'm looking at their Q&A. I came late. What sort of magic do you do, Greg? Well, why don't you give a brief synopsis of that? You don't do the magic, you talk about it.
Yeah, so I'm not a magician. We have, if you missed the early part of my presentation, we have currently 3 generations of magicians in our family. I collect things that have Jewish-related subjects. To talk, as Heidi mentioned earlier, about Jewish heritage, both here in the United States especially, but worldwide as well. And Jewish magicians are a big part of that, as you saw in the presentation. For centuries, Jews have provided tremendous amount of entertainment and some very exciting magic that have been developed that are used by all people. So that's really it. I am not a magician by trade. I am a collector, and magic falls into our Judaic collection.
Oh, okay. Were any of the magicians you spoke about on U.S. stamps?
Yes, Houdini is 2002. That was the one that I know of. I have not seen the other ones on U.S. stamps. We know that Copperfield shows up on quite a few, and Houdini on other country stamps, but that's the only one I know of. If we have some philatelists here that know differently, please speak up and share it with all of us.
Greg he's just the consummate. I just love working with you, Greg. Let's see. This is more of a comment, and if you would like to speak to it, go for it. Surprised that New York was chosen as the city of first issue for the Houdini stamp. Although I know his family moved to New York when he was a teenager, we lived in Wisconsin for a number of years, and Houdini is considered one of the state's most famous Jews. He grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, where his father was the rabbi of the Zion Reform Jewish congregation. I would have selected Appleton as the city of first issue.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that, but obviously I wasn't contacted on where they were going to release that stamp. But anyway, I think because some of his magic was really performed, some of his big tricks in New York City, and he kind of set up residence there. I suspect that's what it is, but I really have no basis for why and where many times why stamps are issued in the cities they are. That is a fairly common question for many different stamps, not just the Houdini one. But I can't argue with that. I would have been just as happy or happier with Wisconsin too.
Do you know if there are any connections between Jewish magicians and the Masonic Brotherhood?
Interesting. I can't answer that specifically, but we do know that there were many people of the Jewish faith that are Masons. One of the most famous is Chaim Solomon, one of the financiers of the American Revolution. George Washington, many of the people in that day were Masons. But I don't know of any connection out of all the research I've done, which, I'm sure there's people that have done way, way more research than I have on this topic, that are authors and so on. But I've seen no connection whatsoever between Masonic rules and regulations and anything to do with Jewish magicians. Heidi, I can't hear you. There you are.
Yes, the Zoom quote of 2020. You're on mute. Sorry, friends. Greg, what about golems, die books, and the Kabbalah? Magic in all of these?
Yeah, so let's take the Kabbalah first. So that's Jewish mysticism. That's something that a lot of people talk about. You see Madonna involved in that and so on. Traditionally, the Kabbalah was something really reserved for the most educated and for a very intense study by rabbis. It wasn't something that was taken very lightly. So that's Jewish mysticism. And I would separate that from what this presentation was, magic. So that's, I just think there's a distinct difference, because that's a highly religious segment of the Jewish faith and very deep and involved. And what we're talking about here today are magicians for public entertainment and, for entertaining the public. What was the rest of that question, Heidi? There were another.
Hold on, Greg, you're breaking up, hon.
There was another component to that question. Let me see if I can find it here.
It was, do these appear philatelically?
Did what appear philatelically? I'm sorry.
The Kabbalah and
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that philatelically. No, that's really kind of truly that is something very religious, and I just don't think so. If you could rephrase that entire question, if you still have it there.
I do. So we would say it was, Greg, what about golems, die books, and the Kabbalah?
Okay, so the golems. Okay, so the golems, were from Prague, Czechoslovakia. That was an old tale, and it was, kind of a monstery kind of superhero figure, if you will. I don't think that really pertains to Jewish magic and Jewish magicians per se. These are very old, century-old tales, and you could call it Jewish mysticism, but not magic for what we're dealing with here today.
Understood.
Other questions?
Understood. I think we hit. I'm looking at the. I'm just making sure that we're looking at the chats, because sometimes questions get into the chats. I did want
that you might mention the Harry Houdini Museum in New York. So we're doing that now. And so if those of you who are interested and you're visiting New York at some time when things kind of get back to normal, it would be a nice place to visit, as are most museums.
Final question before we begin our outro. Are there any, can you talk about different stamps that feature Jewish magicians, or what countries for our collector friends out there who are looking?
Yeah, we covered some. There's a variety of stamps from, many of them are from countries that are not really known for their postage, if you will. Many of them are known for creating stamps as a business. They're usually produced in other countries, printed in other countries. But there's a vast number of them, and you can look in books and so on. We covered a bunch of them here today: the United States, Australia, and so on. But there's, you really have to kind of look around, and I can't off the top of my head recall all the various countries, Mozambique and other places like that. There's so much in magic out there, but Jewish philately, as it relates to magic, is a little tougher to find. So you have to kind of search that out.
And I take it back that I said we were going to wrap it up, but did you ever have occasion to speak with or meet Milt Larson from the Magic Castle in Los Angeles? I believe he was quite a collector.
No, I have not. Unfortunately, I have not. I was ecstatic that my cousin Sarah was able to connect me and be on a very, very small group of people with David Copperfield. And we've been involved now through my cousin with numerous professional magicians from around the globe. And it's really been exciting watching in small venues, even on Zoom, these men and women perform some sensational magic. Much of it they've developed themselves. It's really a fascinating profession. It's a wonderful hobby. And I would encourage everyone, whether it's from a stamp collecting standpoint, whether it's books or actually acquiring and learning how to do magic tricks. When I watch people like my friend Hi Penn in Houston, Dr. Penn in Houston, and he performs for people, just to make people happy, to give them entertainment, I think it's a mitzvah. And I think all of us can find things, whether it's philately, doing presentations like this, or doing magic tricks for people. I encourage everyone, especially in these days, to reach out to people and find something that can make somebody a little bit happier than they are.
Oh, and that's why I love working with you so much. You always spread joy in mitzvahs wherever you go, both you and Michelle. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Friends, Mr. Philipson will be joining us again. I believe that we have a talk coming up in December. So stay tuned. If you have not subscribed to the APS Stamp Chat newsletter, go over to stamps.org/news. If you scroll to the bottom, you can just type in your email address. We keep it short and sweet, and you can plan accordingly. Anything further you'd like to say, Greg?
Thank you, everybody that joined, for your attention. Michelle and I just hope everybody stays well, stays safe, and continues to be collectors and enjoy the fruits that other people collect.
Well, thank you so much. And as Greg said, you can email him. And if you didn't catch that email address, feel free to send me those questions. I will forward .org. And with that, we will conclude our Stamp Chat. We thank you for your attendance, and we ask that you join us in thanking Mr. Gregg Philipson for joining us tonight on Stamp Chat. Today's Stamp Chat was sponsored by the APS Membership Department. Becoming an APS member is easy. Visit stamps.org and apply online, and you'll have access to the American Philatelist, Classroom C3A, and on-demand portal with including presentations from the virtual stamp show, access to the APRL, and more. All ages and interest levels are welcome and encouraged to join the APS. We're 134 years of tradition. Please join us. We welcome you. Connect, collect, join the APS, visit stamps.org, and become a